Ellis and David Gallaher. Next slide.
Next slide.
I'm David Gallaher. I'm the writer and co-creator of The Only Living Boy. I've worked for Marvel Comics, DC Comics, Image Comics. Right now we're doing The Only Living Boy, which is a cool, all-ages, fun, fantastical adventure. I've been working in comics professionally for 16 years. Next slide.
And I've been doing it for about 20 years, a little more than that actually, believe it or not.
Steve Ellis has worked at, oh, go ahead.
I worked at Marvel, DC, all those names he said, and Dark Horse, and as well doing Dungeons and Dragons and stuff for Magic the Gathering and games and stuff like that too.
So, The Only Living Boy is our story about a 12-year-old boy who runs away from home and finds himself lost alone in a patchwork alien world. There's mermaid warriors, insect princesses, mad scientists, chimerical dragons. It's a lot of fun. We love working on it. And this is some of the art from the show. From the book. Art from the show.
Maybe someday.
So today we're going to talk about... So today we're going to talk about what a comic is, how to read a comic, and more importantly, how to make comics. So at the end of today's workshop, we're going to give you guys the tools to make comics of your own. So what is a comic? Comics are stories that use words and pictures together to communicate ideas or concepts. So comics come in all shapes and sizes. This really adorable kitten is like, oh, room service, I bring you your breakfast. That's a comic.
And even though it's not drawn, it's still a comic.
Even though it's not drawn, it's still a comic because it's words and pictures working together to communicate something. This stick figure comic is also a comic. Even though it's very simple in form, it still communicates the ideas it needs to with its pictures.
And this is also a comic. It's much more developed visually, but not every comic has to be.
And this is a Japanese manga comic. Again, even though it's not in color and it's not stick figures, it still communicates ideas with...
even though they call it manga, it's still comics.
Right. Have you guys read this?
That's my favorite anime. I'm on episode 200 something.
I used to edit this. I used to edit this book. So go ahead.
What is it?
This is very good. You don't have to be a great artist or a great writer to make great comics.
So, next.
But making more comics will help you be a better writer and a better artist and a better communicator. The more you do anything, the better you're going to get at it. You're never too young to make comics. Axe Cop is written by a 5-year-old.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, right? Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
And then Stan Lee created Spider-Man when he was 40, and...
He's 93 now and still making new comics.
And
Those are some of the ones he made back in the 60s. You might recognize some of them.
Yeah, Incredible Hulk, Fantastic Four. You guys have heard of those, right?
Yeah.
Right. So how to read a comic? How many here read comics pretty accurately? Okay, all of you. So we're going to go through some very basic things. I'm sure you guys are too smart for this, but let's get through it.
What's neat about it is when you think about reading it, you can learn how to make them. So when you know how it works, you can understand how to make them. And a lot of times we read comics without realizing how it actually works. So that's why we do this.
So to read a comic book, you start from the upper left-hand corner and you move to the right, and you go in a zigzag Z panel. You start on the first panel of the page, you look at the art, you read the words to understand what's happening in the art, and you continue to the next panel, and you read in a Z formation.
It sounds pretty basic, but it's amazing how many people don't get that when they're doing comics.
And knowing this helps you communicate your ideas better. So even though this is how you read a comic, when you're making comics, thinking about this helps you make comics better. These are panels. Each panel represents a snapshot of the story. Most comics have between 4 to 6 panels. Some have as little as 1 and as many as 30 or
more. Yeah,
more.
As many as you can fit into little tiny spaces, right?
There's a word balloon. What a character says goes right in that little balloon. The pointer to the balloon points to what the character is saying. Thought balloon is what a character thinks. And unless they've got some sort of awesome telepathy, We generally, other characters don't know what that character is thinking, but the pointer there points to what that character is thinking. A caption box gives you the extra story information, including where and when a story takes place.
Like meanwhile.
Meanwhile, right. Or East Side Bags, March 5th, 5:06 p.m. Inside the store. Right. So how to make a comic. We're going to talk a little bit about that. So a comic story has two major parts. The art part and the story part. First, we're going to go through the story part. I'm going to talk about that. Steve is going to talk more specifically about the art part. So every story must have a beginning, a middle, and an end, or we call these acts. Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. Basically what that means is the beginning is who is the story about? The middle is what is happening? And the third act is the end, or how is this problem solved? So when we're writing our stories, we're going to talk about who the characters are, what is the problem they're trying to solve, and how will they solve it. So here's a great example with Snoopy. Can everyone see Snoopy up here?
Yes.
So who's the character? The character's Snoopy. Snoopy's throwing the ball. That's who the story's about. What's the problem? Well, the problem is Woodstock doesn't have the ball. So the problem is solved by Snoopy throwing the ball onto Woodstock. Woodstock gets hit by the ball. That's very simple. Who's the character? Snoopy. What is the problem? Woodstock doesn't have the ball. Problem is solved by Woodstock gets the ball, but not the way he necessarily wants it.
See, the answer to the problem isn't always the answer you want.
So we've talked a little bit about story. Again, who are the characters? What is the problem? How is the problem solved? Now we're going to talk about art.
So yeah, I guess I'll take over from here.
Yep.
So I did these little simple drawings because what the panel looks like, meaning what's in the panel, is as important as what happens inside the panel. So what the panel looks like, meaning what's called the composition, is what helps tell the story. So we're gonna move to the next slide. So it would be pretty boring if your whole comic was just this, right? Two people from far away walking up and talking to each other. That'd be pretty boring. So what we do is, we think about three different things: your composition, your shot selection, which gets pretty bit heavy, and then angles. And what that means is the composition is where things are in your panel, right? And we always do think about from left to right for the most part. We start on the left side and move to the right side. So you want your images to do that. And then your shot selection, meaning in a way, where do you want the viewpoint of the picture to come from? So do you want it from the ground looking up at the character? Do you want it from the corner of the room looking down at the character? Do you want it from far away looking at the characters? Or close up looking at the characters? And then the angle is kind of the same thing. I kind of doubled up on that. But it's whether you're looking up or down or behind something. It's where you're looking from, the point of view of the panel. So let's move on to the next one. So these are some other ways of telling the exact same story, but they add more to the story. So before we had one guy walking up and saying hi to his friend, and then the friend saying hi back. Here we have the same scenario, but suddenly each time it changes a little bit. So if you look at this, here we're closing in on the two. Now, rather than being far away people, we can now see who they are. In this one here, we're seeing one guy close up and one guy further away. That changes their relationship to each other. In the third one, that also changes the relationship. One guy is still closer, but he doesn't look as happy, and the other guy is further away again. And then we're looking down on two guys over here. And then we're looking from behind a tree at them talking. Then we're looking at just one guy's hand